going. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Living Life Naturally podcast. And today we have Alicia Davon with us. And Alicia has some interesting stories to tell us. I know after a deeply transformational experience in her early college days, she woke up from a loving yet sheltered upbringing into deep questions of path and purpose. So since that time, she's actively pursued her own personal growth in spirit and in body, exploring learning and sharing a deep, caring interest in women's sexual and romantic satisfaction and joy. Alicia also has a master's degree in integral psychology that's focused on women's romantic and sensual expression, and she explores the power that we as women have through the lens of relationships. She's trained as a therapist and she's led numerous women's groups devoted to female pleasure, relationships, and life. And this was before she met her husband, Erwan. And they now teach together. And because of that, they've opened their own personal path of discovery. And they've learned and shared their most intimate realizations and practices so that others can partake in the gems that they have discovered. So welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
So tell us a little about yourself, a little more than that went into. Tell us about your story.
Sure. Yes. So to start, where I am now is I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live in San Francisco. I'm 42. I'm married to Erwan, who you mentioned in the bio, and we have a 5-year-old son, and his name is Aiden. Yes, he's, of course, amazing and our everything. So that's our situation now. And as you mentioned a little bit in the bio, I'll just give more details. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. I have an amazing family, just 2 parents. They're still around, a younger brother. They all still live in LA. And it was, especially working with singles and couples so intimately over the last 20 years, I see that I had a pretty great upbringing. It was great. Of course, there were some challenges, but nothing compared to what I hear a lot of people share about, unfortunately. So I feel I kind of take that stability and that kind of thing with me into my life now. And I went off to college when I was, however old that was, 18 or something like that. And I was just having a hard time, I was having a hard time making connections with people, and I was really homesick and felt depressed. And that's what led me into therapy. I just wasn't doing well. And that opened up a whole world of growth and transformation and what's possible. And I somehow got hooked up with this woman who led these women's retreats. And they were these kinds of retreats doing things like I had never done before. Like we would be in sweat lodges, where some person would come and build this tent out of sticks and blankets and heat rocks, and it would fill with steam, and we'd all sit inside, and it's so hot, and you just kind of have some kind of awakening. You move through all this fear. You think you're going to die, you can't breathe, but then you realize that you can draw on your own inner strength and, open up and survive the situation, and just lots of connecting and touching in with my deeper self. And it was in those workshops, those scenarios, that I realized that there's so much more to being human, than just kind of our personalities and getting all the circumstances aligned so we're happy. So there's just so much to say about that, but that led me into my master's program. I wanted to learn how to work with people and in groups and individually, and I got my master's and trained as a therapist. But then I met Erwan, who's now my husband, who was doing specific work with both singles and couples around romance and sensuality and communication. And I just thought he was the best thing ever. And what he had created was the best thing ever. So I'm grabbing the guy, and I'm also joining his organization. And that's when I started teaching with him. So that was 20 years ago, about when we met, and I started doing that. And we've been doing that together ever since.
So I think most of our listeners would be familiar with the company that you have. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the official name of our organization is Erwan Davon Teachings. So that's my husband's name. He founded the organization 30 years ago. And then I joined him 20 years ago. And we support singles and couples in unleashing their relationship potential. So people who are single, like either totally single or people who have been married and then divorced or anywhere on that spectrum, and then couples, new couples, couples that have been married for decades, anywhere in between. And people come to us to learn how to develop a thriving relationship. Couples often come to us to get more chemistry and passion in the relationship. Like after you've been with someone for so long, you just kind of get used to them and they're your roommate and, logistical life partner. But, like that romance that once drew you together isn't really on the forefront anymore. So, people have sexual issues, psychological issues around romance and relationships. So we deal with all of that stuff. We have a method that we use, which I'll just briefly go into to give people a sense. There's 5 parts to our method, which is how we support everybody in their goals and their challenges. So the first part is consciousness, bringing awareness to those hidden relationship patterns that we have as human beings that we carry into our relationships, like our conditioning and stuff from the past.
Right.
The second part is contact, making contact with our deepest selves. I mean, there's so many words for that, right? Like your spirit or your soul or your true self or your intuition or whatever it is that, there's so many names. And that creates a really nice foundation then on which to learn things, like you're aware of your patterns, you're connected to yourself. And then the third part is chemistry, like how to create chemistry between 2 people. It could be 2 women, 2 men, men and women. That includes communication and masculine, feminine dynamics. Then there's choreography, which is all about dancing through the stages of relationships successfully. Like what skills do you need to meet someone and date them and have it progress? And what skills do you need for a committed relationship and so forth? And then finally, the 5th part is cultivation of your sexual potential. So, your ability to have pleasure and skills in the bedroom. So we have group online classes and personal coaching and weekend intensives and all kinds of stuff. We work with people of all ages from, mid-20s all the way to 80s. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. So what would you say to so many of my ladies in my audience would be kind of married a long time, maybe in midlife, maybe the kids have left home and here they are left at home with their husband and have probably lost connection by that point. So how would you talk to people at that point in their life? Because I think that they really need to get in tune with their spouse again and really ignite the fire again.
Yes. So the first thing I'll say is that there's this myth that, once you do lots of things, but certainly once you reach a certain age, sexuality is just like not a thing anymore, like, people over 60 or people over 50 or whatever aren't as sexual or something. I was just telling you before we started recording, Erwan and I taught a class called the Pleasure Course. Only for people 60 and over this past weekend. And it was spurred by an old friend of ours who is 77 and has done a lot of this type of teaching for decades. And she wanted to kind of join with us and teach this course only for that age group. So in that class, there were, some couples, there were some singles, and it was just awesome. And the chemistry, like the turn on, the vitality in the room was amazing throughout the course. It's like such a myth. There's like this thing, especially in our culture, of like, once you reach a certain age, you're not like sexual anymore. I'm just saying that's not true. It doesn't have to be true. And there's a lot that we can do like within ourselves and also in a relationship to spark the chemistry. So, I mean, the first thing really is to address it, to say like, hey, because it's so easy to get distracted with hobbies or work or other things, to be like, let's have a heart to heart. Hey, like, we're not connecting the way that I'd like to. And I love you. And I want these years of our life where the kids have moved out to be really great and really fun and romantic and juicy. So kind of to get the partners on the same page about it. And if they aren't on the same page, which sometimes happens, like one partner is like, yeah, I'm just sort of done with that part of my life. I'd rather just, I don't know what, get these other hobbies going. Well, then there's an issue. And then the partner who wants it can kind of figure out how to deal with it or get some support dealing with that, either accepting that or making it more attractive for the partner to come on board. So there's a lot in there. I mean, there's a lot about communication and setting goals and having a vision for that time in the relationship. But I'm mentioning it because, all the tips in the world wouldn't do it if both partners aren't like, yeah. And it can be a little scary sometimes to get back with your partner. Like you'd think them for so many decades, it would be easy to be intimate, but it's kind of hard, especially after you haven't been doing that for a while. So that's the first part, right? So then another big thing that I would suggest is not expecting it to go from 0 to 100 in like a week. We haven't,
really?
right? I know, right? I know, because it's kind of funny. It's like, we haven't really been super romantic or sexual or anything in years. You can't expect to just be raring to go, right away. So there's these conversations and then there's these touching practices that Erwan and I have designed. They're not necessarily sexual. I mean, they can lead to sexual interaction, but it's more like both people are clothed and you put in some nice music in the background, jazz or something new agey, whatever. And one person lays down on their back and the other person sits up by their side and just puts their hands, like one on heart, one on abdomen. And you just kind of breathe. And it's so nice to have somebody's hands on you, and it's like not threatening. It's not like, ooh, this has to go somewhere really sexual. And it helps reignite that physical connection. And then the touching practices progress and there's a communication style associated with them. So those help bridge the gap from like logistics, living as roommates, not having been particularly romantic, to then being more physical. So that's another specific. I should stop to see if you have any questions or comments about what I've said so far.
No, I think that's great because I think it happens so gradually with couples. They're so into, as you say, work or other things or with kids, that sometimes they don't even realize that there's a chance to reconnect again.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And intimacy is it can be confronting. I mean, it's like a sensitive topic. A lot of people have, leftover stuff, like from either their childhoods or from other relationships, or even from the relationship they're in, maybe either conflicts or issues or something that then just got swept under the rug because there were kids and jobs and life, and you just get busy and you just forget, right? So a lot of that stuff can be there. So sometimes people feel a little alone, like, oh, we don't have a romantic connection and that's bad and I should feel embarrassed. Like, no, most people have some challenges in that area. So to just have space for that and bring it into the light, if both people want to do that, I think is really important. Yeah. Like creating the time and space for it is really important because days can just go by. Like Erwan and I, we aren't empty nesters yet. I'm like dreading that so much. I just never want my son to grow up. He's like, oh God. I'm like, I'm always feeling like I'm already dealing with the grief of knowing that like, he's not going to be little forever. But we have our, pleasure time scheduled into our calendar, which some people are like, that's weird. That's, not spontaneous. It should be spontaneous. But in the couples we work with, there's huge value in like saying, okay, we've got this date night here and we've got these times on our calendar to like connect, whether that's sensual time or these touching practices or having a glass of wine together or whatever it is that is romantic and non-logistical.
Yeah, I can really see that because I think that the intimacy factor isn't just about the sexual aspect, and the expectancy for people is probably what pushes them away because they're not quite there yet. So I think that that's an awesome way to work it through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really works. I mean, you have to bring a certain attitude to it, like an open attitude of like, okay, here we go. We're going to engage in this territory again. And, like an open-heartedness. And, that brings in some of the psychological stuff that I was talking about earlier. Some people are very up and willing to do that. Other people are a little scared of doing that or, conflicted. So it's good. But it's such a great opportunity. I mean, these are like the last bunch of years of life, and nobody, I would assert this, like nobody is on their deathbed wishing they worked more, right? They are on their deathbed wishing they had, even better connection, or they're asking themselves, did I really go for it, in the intimate world?
Hey, and really all of this lockdown and pandemic really was a great opportunity for people to reconnect with one another, for couples to reconnect. Shut in, nowhere to go. What a great opportunity.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, of course, I wish the pandemic hadn't happened, but for us, it was really fun because we got to connect with people all over the country, all over the world, and couples were just like, we're now in our house. We're like going to kill each other. We're like, why don't you just, like learn these touching practices? And it's like something fun to do, while you're inside.
Yeah. So when you do classes with groups, is it open to all ages, or do you do specific age groups at a time?
It's open to all ages. The course that I was talking about that was just for people 60 and over was like a one-off special thing that we did with our friend. We did it a couple of times, but we're not planning to do another one. So all of our classes are open to all ages, 18 and over, of course.
Yeah, that's great. So tell people where they can find you.
So the best place to find us, if you're listening to this and you're like, God, I'd be interested in learning more about working with these people and, you want to know more, I'm offering a free love life consultation to anybody who's listening to this that wants to know more. And the best way to set that up, I'll make sure you have this info, Lynn, is to text our business line, our organization's line, which is 415-308-9580. That's 415-308-9580. You just text it and say, hi, I heard about you on this podcast and I'd like a conversation. We'll have a conversation. We'll get personal. You can share with me what's happening with you, what your challenges and goals are. And then if it looks like we can support you, then I'll lay out the different options we have to work with people. I'll also give you a link. Like if people feel more comfortable just clicking a link to set this thing up, you can do that. And our website is pleasurecourse.com, so people can go there. And then, anybody who's listening to this that requests a consultation, I'll also send a free video of the 5 keys to a successful relationship, which is awesome. A pretty fun thing to look through. It's about 12 minutes.
That's great. I appreciate that. So You know I had told you when we were doing our podcast together, the time a G-rated show. So
Yes.
I think that that's come across very well, and
Good.
people totally know what you're talking about. And I think it's just such a great opportunity for people to get on board with something like this. I would especially encourage my listeners who are in that 50 or so range, because it's so essential to do something like this and really keep things fresh with you and your spouse, especially when you're going through change. You know, you want to move forward in the right direction. I think that you can help people get there.
Thank you. Yes, it would totally be my pleasure. It's a lot of fun, and it's totally worth it. It's like paying attention to our vitality and our health. Obviously, you are a huge proponent of that, and
Right.
love and romance. I mean, who doesn't want that?
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have any last minute tips for our listeners?
Last minute tips. I think my biggest tip is, if you want to have an even more vital relationship life, whether you're single or in a relationship, devote the time and the energy to it. It's just as simple as that, really. I mean, there's all sorts of tips and skills or whatever, but it's just making it a priority. So those are my parting words.
And you having said that, I did want to make a comment that you had made a comment that you schedule it into your calendar. Well, I teach my women in my group and my clients, schedule things like self-care into your calendar, schedule the things that are important to you. So this is really one of the most important things. And I don't think it takes away from the spontaneity. If anything, it can be anticipatory for people.
Totally. It is. It's exciting. You get to look forward to it. And then it infuses the rest of your relationship and your life, really, with this vitality, this very natural vitality.
Well, thank you. Appreciate all of your input and encouraging us to be more intimate and more aware of our whole relationship with not just our spouses, but as you say, when people are single, seeking out that person that you can totally connect with.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And I will put all of your information in our show notes so that people can contact you. And then let me have that number again, and I will put that in there too.
That's great.
So much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye for now.
Bye for now.